If you're a domestic abuse survivor out there and you want to learn how to heal, recover, and rebuild after experiencing the trauma of abuse, then you might want to consider following us on this channel as we do weekly shows bringing experts on the scene to help you do just that. Host Ogochukwu Alako Katarin, and today we're going to be talking about how to find happiness after trauma. So we have a very lovely lady. I call her the strongest woman I know, and you will see why in a minute. When she comes up here, she blows me away. So she's going to be talking about how to choose happiness. Okay, it's not because things work out perfect for you to. Happiness is a choice. Basically, that's what she's going to be talking about, and I don't want to do all of the talking for her. I'm going to bring her up here in a moment. She's a published author. She has a wonderful book titled My Cry to God, and she's going to share all of that with you. So without further ado, let's bring up Lucy Irvin. And we bring you up. And you're up. Hi, Lucy. Hi. How are you? I'm so glad you're able to make it today. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you because I know a lot of people struggle, especially when going through trauma. They feel like they don't have a choice, and you are here to show that in spite of what you may be going through, you can choose. So go ahead and just give us a little background of who you are. Then you can go to tell us why you're doing what you do right now. So who are you?
Okay. I'm 38 years old, and I have been through more than the average individual has, ends up going through, in their entire lifetime. And when I discovered that, I realized real quick that I had to do something with it. I chose to live with it, live through it, and I decided it was time to make a choice to have happiness and joy and to reach out and allow God to come into my life. And, I had already been raised in the church. The only difference is as a child, I would be dropped off at church. I would, and then my family would pick me up afterwards, things like that.
Right.
I realized quickly that that made a big difference. Oh, because I did it by myself as a child, like 5, 6 years old. As a child, I have been taught from the day I was born that basically that abuse is okay.
Right.
I come from a family that now I'm not talking, and I make this very clear every time I tell my story. I'm not talking about discipline. I'm not talking about, regular discipline on a child. That's, completely different. I'm talking about the first time I was forced to apologize for something I didn't do. And I was 8 years old. And the first time I remember my head being thrown into a window, I was 5.
Wow.
So that just kind of gives you a sum up of my childhood. Now, 50% of the time, things were wonderful. It wasn't an everyday abuse.
Occurrence.
It was enough to damage me. And I have learned that as a child, if you were abused, you end up being attracted to other abusers in your lifetime and your adulthood. And I have found that is very true.
Absolutely. We call it the creative brain, and it doesn't care about whether something is good or bad for you. It just tries to keep you safe. And anything that is familiar to you is safe. So when you come out as a child that has experienced abuse and you're in the dating scene, when you meet an abusive man, your brain tells you it's familiar.
Exactly.
And it's safe. You're like, okay, I understand this dynamics. Guess what? I survived it as a child, so I can survive it again. So it's safe. So you end up choosing, an abusive partner.
Exactly. And you don't know it going in.
No, you don't.
No abuser is going to come at you. You're not going to meet them and know that they're an abuser at the time. I had an abusive ex-boyfriend, but I was lucky enough to see it early on and got out of that. But then that's when I met my ex-husband.
Which was also
Um,
abusive.
yes, oh man. The last time my ex-husband got a hold of me was with the golf club.
Wow.
And I am very, very blessed to have gotten out of that alive. Um, but to tell the world my story, I had already dealt with cervical cancer cells and had a lot of procedures and surgeries between 15 and 17. So
Wait,
when
so
I
you
met,
so you got cancer when you were between 15 and 17?
yes,
Cervical cancer.
cancer cells,
Wow.
it's called dysplasia,
Oh,
but
wow.
mine was so bad that but by the time I was 22, I had major surgery
Oh my God.
um, to remove the cells out of my uterus and other places that had spread rapidly. Lucky enough for me, and
Hmm.
thank God, I never had to do chemo. But
Oh.
it was really, really bad. It was. But when I met my ex-husband, I'd already been through that. And the worst attack that I remember
Hmm.
from him was the night that he beat me into labor. And long story short, our daughter died. And I was so, I've learned a lot about trauma bonding.
Hmm.
And I was so messed up. My mind was so engulfed in emotion
Right.
and pain from my daughter's death and her funeral. And, I was 18 when she died.
Oh, God.
So I was a teenager.
Right.
Um, and then a year later, I held my son until he passed away. So by the time I was 19, I had already buried two children. I had already been an abused wife, child, fought cervical cancer. I really truly did not think I would ever live this long at that time,
Yes. Absolutely.
and I begged God. I begged God to take me. I never wanted to take my own life. I want to make that clear. But I did want God to take me because I was so, so emotionally damaged that I really could not take it anymore. And that's when I fell into addiction.
Hmm.
After
What kind?
about 4 years of addiction, I did have an overdose and a near-death experience.
What kind of
I
addiction
tell
was
people,
that?
ma'am, what'd you say?
No, I said, what kind of addiction was that? What were you addicted to?
A little bit of everything, but my drug of choice was methamphetamines. Because let me tell you why. There's a reason I chose that.
Mm.
Um, my ex-husband, of course, I found out after we were married that he
Hmm.
was a drug addict.
Oh my
He
God.
was 26 and I was 18 when we got married. So
Right.
he was older than me and I didn't know any better. I didn't really understand how bad off he was. But after my second child died, I would dream one night that my daughter died all over again. And the next night I would bury her all over again. And the next night my son, every single night I relived their death
The
and,
experience.
and their
My God.
funeral. And I could not. I was spinning out of control. And I would beg God, please help me, please help me. And I felt like, and in my book, I make it clear for a long time, I felt like God didn't love me as much as he loves other people.
Mm.
I have finally learned that is not true.
That is
But I
absolutely not true. Yes.
no. But at the time, I
It felt
really
like it
believed
was
that.
true.
Yeah, I felt
Yeah,
like, why would he allow me to go through this much pain?
that's right.
And I just thank God that when I overdosed, I had my near death experience. And I tell people all the time, rather it was a dream, a hallucination, it doesn't matter. It was real to me, even though I know it was real. God gave me a great gift. And that gift was the vision of where I was headed, which was hell.
Mm.
And I do write about every detail of it in my book. it was the most powerful. And some people are like, because people want to hear stories about, oh, I visited heaven or I dreamed about heaven. Nobody wants to hear about hell.
Hell, yes.
And
Well, we run away from it. It's like a nemesis, right? So we like
right,
ignore it. Let's ignore
nobody,
this.
nobody,
Hmm.
no, yeah, nobody wants to believe that you could actually go to a place full of flames,
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but I did. And, again, like I said, maybe it was a hallucination. I don't know, but it was real to me and it changed my life
And you
forever.
change it up. Okay, so I want to go into how, in the face of all of these challenges, you were able to choose. Was it something that you spoke to yourself about, or was it just an awakening that made you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to choose this? What was that turning point?
Okay, that is an easy one. Um, I discovered that I was already choosing because I after my overdose, I went to rehab and I took it seriously.
Mm,
Um, and
seriously, I
after
like that.
rehab, after rehab, when I got out of rehab, I went
Mhm.
to my grave, and I will never forget. It was a physical feeling because I swear, God, I feel like He dumped a pile of bricks on my head. I was sitting there at their grave. They're both buried together, of course, side by side.
Mhm.
Um, my first two, anyway.
Yeah.
Haven't got to my third. But I was sitting there and I was praying and I was crying and I was begging. And for the first time since my children died, I was on my knees screaming to God.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden I felt like this powerful feeling of, like I always say, somebody, God dumped a pile of bricks on my head. And it was like I had an awakening. And I said, oh my gosh, I've got to choose to keep living. I've got
Mm.
to choose because my children are watching me. And
Mm.
I remember thinking, I don't want my children to say, you know, my mama's, that's why she's so unhappy and she's so
Mm.
miserable because of us.
Yeah.
Because I know they were watching over me. I know where they're at. I know, but it hit me. I am going to choose happiness and I'm not going to give it up. I realized that if I can make it and still occasionally still smile or still laugh or still look around me and comprehend that there are some beautiful things in this world during that much pain,
Mm.
then I was already choosing to live.
I love it.
I just made the choice to uh, accept it and take it all in.
I love it. I love it. It's just, this is a clear definition of what the power of perspective is. It's like, I just love that we have so much power. And that's what I try to teach people. Like, we are not helpless. We're not helpless. We are powerful enough to choose the perspective at which we view things. And that is what you are coming on to share with our audience. You're inspiring them to not feel like they're powerless over their situation. And
Exactly.
I absolutely love your story. I love your story. I love the power of God in it. I love the choice that you made, you
I tell
know?
you, I beg God. I
Yeah.
went and I got a wonderful job here in my little town. And
Amen.
that's when I begged God to show me what love was. Because, of
Mm,
course, my ex-husband was still, you know, trying to get me to come back like he always had. Um, and I came close. I'm not going to say I didn't
mm-hmm,
because, you're always in fight or flight mode once
mm-hmm.
you're an abused person,
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
But the trauma bonding and the comfort, because he would look at me and say, you're the mother of my children. Aren't we buried two children together? And, we have a connection. And at the time we did.
Yeah.
And I almost went back, but I begged God, please, Lord, don't let me go down that road again.
Amen. Yeah.
Show me love, and that's
Right.
when He sent me my husband now. I'm
And
not
how
gonna
long
sit
how long have
here.
you been married to him?
The fifth was 15 years.
Yay, that is so
Yes,
amazing. That is so amazing. I'd like you to, yeah, I love, congrats on that. I love it. I saw your anniversary and I was just blown away that it is beautiful when God
It is.
steps into a situation. I'd like you to explain a little bit about trauma bonding because some of our viewers don't really understand what that is. Then we will talk about your book a little bit. So,
Yeah, and I'm not even finished with my story.
so tell us
Trauma,
about what trauma bonding means.
trauma bonding, to sum it up for anyone who has never heard of it,
Mhm,
it is just like I said, when you meet someone, you don't see the
mhm,
abuse on them. You don't see their narcissism or any evil in them. You don't, they are charming, they are loving, they swoop in and they take over you
mhm.
somehow. It's almost like a brainwashing.
Yes.
And once they don't start abusing you immediately. Sometimes it's a year later, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 6 months, it's never immediately. And so you are already in a relationship, whether it's your parents, siblings, husband, wife, whatever the relationship is,
Mhm,
you're already in it for so long that you are mentally tied to that
mhm.
relationship.
For sure. Yeah.
And you are basically the first time that they abuse you. You're traumatized and you don't know
Mhm,
what to do about it. And there's a bond, just to kind of sum it up, there's a bond that just keeps us tied to that abuser. And it is a real thing. And that
it
is
is a real thing.
why I
Mhm,
tell people all the time, because people, why'd you stay so long? Why'd you stay so long? It's because of trauma bonding. That is the actual reason why we stay,
mm.
because we're connected, we're bonded to that abuse.
To that abuse,
And
yeah.
yeah, and it's a mental, it's like a mental illness, really.
Mm. Oh, wow. Okay, so tell us about your book and where they can get it. Uh,
Okay.
People can buy
Um,
your book.
well, that's what I was going to say. I want the viewers to know when I talk about happiness after trauma, not only did God bless me with an amazing husband that's never laid his hand on me in anger, but after 4 miscarriages, I do have a living son.
Yes.
Um, God let me have one. And don't get me wrong, he was 2 months premature, was flat on my back for 8 months. It was the most god awful pregnancy you could ever even imagine, but I would do it all over in a second. Um, and he just turned 14 and he was premature, but he was healthy. They were able to give him to me, and that's my happiness. But after him, I started writing when I was young, and poems and short stories. And I did handwrite a book one time as a teenager. I didn't, take it seriously, but I decided to write My Cry to God after my youngest son was stillborn in my bathroom.
Mm.
Um, I was pregnant with twins, and we weren't supposed to ever have another child, right? So I miscarried one, and that's when we discovered it was twins. And long story short, I accidentally delivered him in my bathroom by myself, and he was stillborn, which almost took my life. And after my youngest son died, I had about a 6 month of a what do I do? Where do I go? Why did this happen to me again? Kind of, thing. And I
Yeah.
started writing. And all of a sudden, one day I said, you know what? I chose to live my life. I made a choice to keep going and keep growing. And yes, my youngest son died after, because being I had a living son, I couldn't understand, why this happened again to me of all people. And it hit me. God's not through with my story yet.
Mm. Amen.
Period.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I truly, it hit me one day. I said, I've made this choice to choose joy, to choose happiness. Now, I want the world to know that I am also the face of depression, PTSD, anxiety, bipolar disorder. People look at me and they have literally said, Lucy, you do not look like a mental illness.
No,
Well,
you do not.
you know,
No,
this
you
is
do not. And I like that. It's not this perfect picture perfect situation right now. Even though
exactly,
you're choosing happiness, doesn't mean you don't have your struggles. And I love that
exactly.
because sometimes we get caught up in how perfect another person's life is, and we think our lives are just shitty because that person looks perfect on the outside. But here
Exactly.
it is, you are showing the sincerity of where you are, even though you made a choice. I still struggle. Okay. So don't look
I
at
think
me and
so.
think I'm perfect. No,
Right.
it's the choice that I get to make every single day.
That's what I tell people all the time. I make
Yeah.
a choice to get out of that bed every morning.
Yeah.
Now, I did a video yesterday on my Facebook author page. My oldest son died in December. And so this month is hard on me. It doesn't matter that I have a living son and an amazing husband and a life that I have begged God for. My children are still gone. I
Yeah.
still have a mental illness, several of them, and I make a choice. People say, oh, there are people out there that, make fun of people with mental illnesses, which makes me so mad because this is the bottom line. With a mental illness, it does not mean you're crazy or weak. It only means that you have been strong, too strong for way too long. And that's the bottom line. And so
That's the
you make
bottom
a
line.
choice. Yeah, I make
Right.
a choice. And so when I wrote my story, I just let it come. I prayed over it. I have another book out, but I didn't write it how God wanted me to. And it didn't, it just wasn't right. This book, My Cry to God, the entire story,
Hmm.
um, has touched so many people. And I know that I know now, because nobody's trauma is more or less than another person.
Anybody? Yes. Yes.
But a lot of people feel like they don't have a voice, and there are a lot of people, most people, they don't talk about their issues or the things that have happened, and I'm fine with it. I am not embarrassed because, there's nothing to be embarrassed of. I
No,
rose
absolutely.
above it. I made a
Absolutely
choice.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, I made
So
a choice to rise above it, and so I wrote the book. And first, I self-published it, but recently
okay.
it's been picked up by a traditional publisher,
Well, congrats.
and
That's
it has
that's
done.
yeah, that's
I
good news.
and it's been completely re-edited, relaunched. It's almost anywhere online you can find it, but I always tell people to go to Amazon. That's the best price. And I always tell people if you cannot afford it, I did not write this book for any other reason but to share my story and uplift other people. So all you have to do is check with your local library, and if they don't have it, they'll order it for you, and you don't got to spend a penny.
It's,
I just want people to know that there is happiness after trauma.
yeah.
It doesn't matter if you can look at my story, which I mean, truth is, I used to say that I'm the strongest person I've ever known, but I have learned that it's not really that I'm strong. It's just that I decided to never give up. And I decided to voice, I want to give other people a voice because it is hard for people to talk about what's happened to them.
Yes,
And
that's absolutely true. Learning to turn that mess into a message is just it's phenomenal because then you get to raise other people too, and that's
right, and
powerful.
uplift and encourage, and like me and you, or you and I'm sorry,
Yeah.
um, we helping each other and collaborating together. And all these women and blogs and podcasts I've done, I love it because we come together,
Together,
and
a voice.
we've got
Yeah.
to stick together.
Yes, we have to.
Um,
We
we
have
can
to.
change the world. We can change
We
the
can.
world if we stick together.
Yeah, one person at a time. Yes, we can. Yes, we
Exactly.
can. So, we have come to this section or the segment, I like to say, that you get to tell our viewers one small step that they can implement today, and it will start taking them towards healing, recovering, and rebuilding.
Decide to choose. Decide to do what is best for you, because if you choose to never give up, no matter how hard it gets, I promise it will be worth it.
Mhm.
And in the long run, you might have to choose 100 times.
Yeah,
You might have to pray for the same thing 100 times. But eventually, you will have happiness after trauma if you just choose to keep going and never give up. No
I
matter
love
how
that.
hard it gets, if I truly believe that if I can sit here and tell you my story, I truly believe that that anybody can do the same.
I do too. I mean, just guys, you want to hear Lucy's story, just get her book, because I mean, we don't have enough time to go into the details of that, but the book does just that.
Mhm.
Get inspired by getting her book. How can people get in touch with you, Lucy? Because I'm sure some people would want to, talk to you, get encouraged by you. And
I
so,
do
what's the
talk to a
best
lot of
way?
people.
Yeah, what's the best
Um,
way to get in touch with you?
there is a new author page, author Lucy Irving. And if they want to just look me up on my personal Facebook page or
Okay.
Instagram or Twitter, you can do that too. And right now, that's kind of it.
From Lucy herself. It was just amazing, and I hope you got inspired to choose happiness. Love you guys. Remember, you are strong, you are brave, and you are enough.